Hi, this is Rebecca, and welcome back to watching my channel, Grow to Gather. And if you're new here, I live on just about a half acre of land, and I try to grow as much of my own food as possible, but I try to do as much as I can outside in the garden and preserving. But it's the beginning of July here, and my garden's really in full swing, and hopefully yours is too. July's really an exciting month in the garden. Hopefully your plants are really starting to take off and produce pretty heavily. Like a lot of these I expect to be producing pretty heavily in the next month or so. But you probably also have some plants that are starting to struggle or die off. I have some peas and some broccoli that are probably pretty close to coming out of the garden. And you may also have some things that are ready to be replaced, or you might have some things that you've even been struggling with a bit. I've been struggling, for example, to get beans started. We've had challenging weather this year. It's either been really hot or it's just been raining for days on end. So I do have some things I've been struggling with too. But one thing that you can be doing in July just to counteract some of those struggles is starting to plant some other things to replace what you've already had come out, extend your harvest, or even just to start a fall garden. And if you really want to do any of these things, you really should be planting in the month of July. So keep watching for some ideas of what you can be planting. So the first thing you want to consider whenever you're deciding what to plant is your first fall frost date. And you can look this up online, but ours here is October 8th. So from the beginning of July, that gives about 99 days of a growing window. So that's still really a lot of time to plant a lot and do a lot of things out here. The list that I have really isn't all inclusive of the things you can be growing. But the main thing you want to reference is the days to maturity date on your seed packet. Your seed packet's really going to have a lot of information for you, and it's going to give you an idea of how many days to maturity all your varieties are, and this will give you an idea of what you can actually grow. Now you do want to leave a little bit more time for this because it is going to be going into fall and the days are going to be shorter. It's going to be getting colder. That estimated first frost date is just that, an estimate, so it could be even sooner. So you may want to add a week or two to that window just to be sure, or you might just want to take a chance and see what happens. But even heading into fall on that first fall frost date, you still can plant some plants for a fall harvest. And I'm going to mention some varieties that you can be planting this month for that fall harvest. And I'm going to be talking about that later in the video. Now, one of the first things that you could be planting this month is summer squash, like zucchini, yellow cracknut, or patty pan squash. A lot of those have about a 60-day days to maturity, so you likely have plenty of time to get that started and get that going. And as you can see behind me, I have some that are doing very well, some that are doing not so well. But it's always nice to have one as a backup, or maybe you just want to extend the harvest and have them throughout the summer, if you do really like summer squash or if you like preserving them. So to get these started in July, you can either plant them in a seed starting pot or you could put them directly in your garden. If you don't currently have a lot of room in your garden, a seed starting pot is a great way to have it in a pot and just have it out of the way for the next 3 weeks or so. So you can use it to replace something that has started to struggle and that you do need to replace at that point. But you could just direct seed these in the ground as well. Kind of just whichever is your preference. If you do start them in a seed starting pot, you just want to make sure that you use one that's relatively big because they do grow very quickly relatively to other seeds. So you just want to make sure that you're giving them enough room to thrive and succeed. So another big variety of plants I'm going to be planting in the next few months is cucumbers. I'm going to be replacing these peas right here with some cucumbers. As you can see, these peas are starting to dry out and struggle a bit with the warm weather, but I'm trying to let them dry out a little bit just to use some of these pods to save for future seed. But they will be coming out fairly soon, and once that happens, the cucumbers will likely be going in. But cucumbers are great to start in July because they're about 65 days to maturity, so I do want to get them started fairly soon, but they should do pretty well. Now you can start the cucumbers in either the cell pats, or you could put them directly in the ground. I will likely be putting them directly in the ground just because I usually don't have problems with that. And I have a few you can't really see from this angle, but they're around the side of these peas. So as long as I keep them moist, they should do well here. Another thing that I will be planting a lot to replace a lot of these spring crops that are coming out is beans. And if you heard in the video earlier, I have been struggling quite a lot with beans this year, but I think because the weather's finally starting to even out a little bit here, it should go a little bit better this time. But beans grow in about 50 to 60 days, a lot of varieties, and they don't take up a ton of space. Typically, if you're planting a bush bean, you could plant about 5 per square foot is what I typically do. So they're really great whenever you're taking things out because they are relatively compact if you're planting those bush beans. Or you could plant the pole beans that can grow up and take more space, but they don't take a lot of time to mature, and they're really great at nitrogen fixing for the soil. I have been missing the beans this summer, so really hoping to plant some soon and get them started. Another category that I'm planting more of soon is greens. So you can plant Malabar spinach still. It is not a true spinach, it's more like a vine, but you can use it pretty similarly to spinach. But it loves the heat, and contrary to spinach, which you have to plant in cool weather, you can be planting that now. Another thing that you can be planting as well is lettuce, and this one does come with a little bit of a caveat because it does really prefer cool, moist soil. And if you can see behind me, I have a lettuce that has bolted. But to grow lettuce in the summer, you can choose more heat-resistant varieties. If you go on a lot of the websites that sell seed, a lot of them will mention if varieties are better in the heat, like some of the romaine types. Like I have a Sunland lettuce that does grow better in the heat. But you can also try to keep lettuce planted in a shaded area or under shade cloth if you can, because that will help make it slower to bolt. And you can start these in the garden either directly in the ground if you can find a shaded area, or you can use cell pats. I will likely be using the cell pats and start some maybe inside or underneath my deck. I have a deck that's covered and it's relatively shady, and it's good to start plants on in the summer that I don't want directly in the garden. But that is one way to kind of get around having your lettuce directly in the sun whenever it's just going to bolt quickly. Now, one green that you can plant in the summer that's going to do well is chard. I will likely direct seed my chard, but chard does very well in the heat, does well growing all year round, and it's really great to have. It can be a little bit bitter, so maybe in the summer whenever it's hotter, you want to pick it whenever it's younger and eat the leaves whenever it's younger, but that is something also that you can be planting and enjoying in the summer into fall. Now, another category of things that I am going to be planting more of is herbs. Basil, for example, is really great to have on hand in like August or September whenever you have a lot of tomatoes coming, hopefully. But it does go to seed, and it doesn't taste quite as good as whenever it does to seed. You can kind of prolong it going to seed by keeping it trimmed pretty frequently, which is what I try to do. And usually mine lasts till about the end of the season. But I do like to have a few plants that are started a little bit later just to kind of prevent that happening. But you can start that now. It's relatively quick growing. And you don't even have to really start that from seed. It's very easy to take to cutting. Another herb that you could be starting in July is parsley, and I have some right beside me. But parsley does take a while to get growing. But the thing with parsley is it does handle the cold weather. I actually had some over winter a few times that just lasted through the winter, and in the spring I had parsley ready to go. So that is why I may get some started again in July. Another herb that I will be starting more of is dill. And as you can see, a lot of mine has gone to seed. But dill is very easy to direct sow. It grows relatively quickly, and it'll be great to have on hand for the cucumbers that'll hopefully be coming later in the year. I also may be planting more flowers. Now, some like the sunflowers do need a little bit longer to mature. You can find some quicker maturing sunflowers, but you do want to double check on those just to make sure you have enough time. But some things like the zinnias and the nasturtiums, you likely do have enough time to plant more of if you do want more. Now, another thing you can be planting this month is cover crops. I have some broccoli behind me. This is about ready to come out, but there's going to be an open spot here. And you really don't want to have open spots on your soil just because it is going to lead to more weeds and more upkeep on your end, and you're really not giving anything back to the soil by leaving that open spot. So if you use a cover crop, it can help with weed suppression, it can help add organic matter back to the soil, you can use it as a living mulch. But some that are good to plant in the summer are buckwheat. I use a lot of buckwheat sometimes, and other people use cowpeas or sorghum Sudan grass. And as you take some of these spring crops out, you may also want to start prepping for your fall garden and thinking about what you're going to be planting in the fall. It's really nice to be harvesting in October or even over the winter if you can. So one thing that I will likely be starting in about mid-July is peas. I have another spot I'm going to plant them in the fall, but they are a little bit more challenging to start in the summer just because they do like those cool, moist conditions that you have a little bit more in spring. But one way you can try to get around that is you can soak the seeds before you put them out, or you could try to pre-sprout them if you put them in a moist paper towel and leave them in there until they sprout and then plant them out. But I'm going to be trying to start those in about mid-July for a fall harvest. Another thing that I'm going to be starting soon is carrots and beets. I have some back in this bed. They're kind of hard to see, but you could start those from about mid-July for a fall harvest or into September for a winter harvest. And these are also a bit challenging to get started in the summer just because they also do prefer that cool, moist soil. But one way to get around that is whenever you plant them, you can plant them slightly deeper, not dramatically deeper, maybe about like double what you would, but just don't go much further than that. And you can try to keep that soil as moist as you can by putting a board over top once you put those seeds in, and that'll help hold in the moisture. It sounds a little bit weird, but if you check those every day or two, once you see them sprout and take that board out, they'll grow just fine. The board will help hold in the moisture. You will get much better germination than you would just putting them in the soil by themselves. Now, the final category of things that I will be getting started soon are brassicas, and that's things like cabbage, kale, cauliflower, kohlrabi, broccoli. And they also can be a little bit challenging to get started in the summer just because, like a lot of these things I've just been mentioning, they prefer the cool, moist soil. But I will be starting a lot of these inside relatively soon. I'm aiming for the next day or two in the first week of July. Now, you can try to keep these outside and just plant them also in a cool, shaded area and direct sow them. That also works out just fine for a lot of people. Just for me, I find that I don't have that many cool shaded areas, so I will be putting them inside in the seed cells. And these will continue to grow past the frost date, so that doesn't come much into play with these, but they're nice to have harvest in the fall. And there are certain varieties of these brassicas that do grow better in the fall. That's also something that you can find on a lot of the seed sites. They all will grow in the fall, but some of them might just grow a little bit better, so that might be something good to reference if you have multiple seed pads on hand. So I just wanted to give a quick demonstration as to how I am going to be starting these brassicas inside in seed cells. So this is a 24 seed cell, and I am going to put it in this 10-20 tray, and this is just going to help with the water, because ideally with these seeds, whenever you have them in the cell trays, you do want to bottom water just because you want to avoid getting the leaves wet. But I'm just going to put this in here, and I'm going to be filling it with pro mix. You can use any sort of potting soil really, or seed starting medium. The only thing with that is you do need a little bit more just because the seed starting material doesn't have any really nutrients. But you just want something that's going to be relatively fine. Like you can see some twigs and branches in that. I'm going to be trying to pick those out as best as I can. But the first thing I'm going to be doing is I'm going to go ahead and fill these cells. And I am just going to use a watering can today. You just want that soil nice and pre-moistened to help your seeds sprout. But the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and make a hole about 1/4 inch deep in here for my seeds. Now I'm going to go ahead and start putting seeds in. So the first one I'm going to do is cauliflower. And I'll be doing about 2 seeds per cell. Just because if one does not sprout, then I will have extra.
A few moments later.
Nice labels in, and then I will go and cover these up with just a little bit of more potting soil. Once I'm finished with everything, I'm going to go ahead and put my plants under some grow lights. And I'm just going to go ahead and mist these just to make sure that the soil that I put over top of the seeds is moist. And then I am going to go ahead and put on a humidity dome. And what the humidity dome is going to do is it's going to help keep the moisture in with these seeds and help them sprout. And I'm just going to go ahead and check these every day or so just to make sure they're still moist. They probably only are going to need watered every few days, but I will mist them with this little sprayer until they have sprouted. And then once they sprout, I will switch to the bottom watering that I mentioned earlier. So I have adjusted my lights so that they're closer to the top of where the plants will be, just so whenever they pop up, the light will be closer. But in a few weeks, they will hopefully all be sprouted, and I'm going to take this dome off and put a fan on these just to get some circulation going. But hopefully in a month or so, they'll be ready to start hardening off and move outside. Sure. So that is it for today. Thank you so much for watching. If you got any value from this, please like and subscribe. But I would love to know in the comments what you're planning on planting this July. But thanks for watching.